Jon Jones might be the most talented fighter to ever step into the octagon, but he's also one of the most hated champions in UFC history. In 2015, Jones was involved in a hit-and-run where he crashed into a car driven by a pregnant woman and fled the scene. That moment turned a lot of fans against him for good. How can you root for a champion who literally left a woman hurt on the road? And that was just the start. The arrests, the drugs, the partying, they never stopped. In 2021, he was arrested again in Las Vegas, this time after a domestic violence incident where his fiancée called the police. The charges were later dropped, but for fans, it was just more proof that Jones was a champion who didn't deserve respect. Even now, the biggest knock on him is that he never faced Tom Aspinall. Fans swear he walked away because he didn't want that fight. The UFC even claimed they had prepared an offer worth $30 million for Jones to face Aspinall, and that he initially agreed, only to pull out in the end. Jon Jones has the skills of a legend, but for many fans, his story will always be defined by scandals, wasted chances, and the fights he never took. Conor McGregor might be the most polarizing champion the UFC has ever had. Loved and hated in equal measure. When he knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, it was legendary. When he moved up and demolished Eddie Alvarez to hold 2 belts at once, it was historic. But for as much as he gave fans those wow moments, his title reigns left a lot of people pissed off. Conor never defended his belts, not once. After winning the featherweight title, he never fought at 145 again. The UFC stripped him after nearly a year. Then, after winning the lightweight belt, he sat on it for over 500 days while chasing a boxing payday against Floyd Mayweather. The lightweight division was stacked with killers like Khabib and Tony Ferguson, but nobody could get their shot because Conor wasn't coming back. Fans started calling him a fraud. To them, he was more of a celebrity than fighter. And then came the scandals. Everyone remembers the infamous bus attack during UFC 223 Fight Week. Then there were the bar fights, the endless trash talk, the arrests. On top of that, he was accused of multiple assaults and even faced sexual assault allegations in the media, though none of those ever led to a conviction. Still, for many fans, the damage was already done. By the time he finally fought Khabib, it had been nearly 2 years since his last MMA fight. He showed up to the press conference with both belts he didn't even own anymore, and fans laughed at him. To them, he was all talk, no defenses, and way too many scandals. Conor McGregor made history, yes, but he also created one of the emptiest reigns in UFC history. He was a champion on paper, but in the eyes of a lot of fans, he'll always be remembered more for the chaos outside the cage than for defending anything inside of it. Brock Lesnar's UFC run is one of the most hated and also one of the most watched. When he signed with the UFC, fans hated how much hype he got. He had one pro fight before the UFC, then lost his debut against Frank Mir. Normally that would kill a push, but the UFC doubled down. 2 fights later, Brock was fighting Randy Couture for the heavyweight title, and he won. But instead of respect, it made fans furious. They said he didn't deserve the shot, that he only beat a 45-year-old Couture who was way smaller than him. Then came the rematch with Mir. Brock dominated him on the ground, smashing his face in while fans in the crowd begged the ref to stand them up. After the win, Brock flipped off the crowd and cut one of the wildest post-fight promos in UFC history. He said he was going to drink Coors Light instead of Bud Light because Bud Light wouldn't pay him anything. He even talked about climbing on top of his wife. Fans weren't just booing, they were livid. Everyone prayed Shane Carwin would be the one to shut him up. For a round, it looked like it was happening, but Brock came back and submitted him. That's when people realized the hate wasn't going away. Eventually, Cain Velasquez destroyed him, and fans celebrated. But even after he was gone, the resentment lingered. To many fans, Brock Lesnar was the ultimate proof that the UFC cared more about selling fights than respecting the sport. Ronda Rousey started out as one of the most loved champions in UFC history and ended as one of the most hated. When she debuted at UFC 157, she was unstoppable. Every fight ended in the first round, usually by armbar. She was the first big name in women's MMA, and fans were obsessed. But then came the Ultimate Fighter. Her rivalry with Miesha Tate got ugly, and Ronda came off as bitter, angry, and hard to root for. She refused to shake hands after fights and carried herself like she was above everyone. The UFC hype machine only made it worse. Ronda was everywhere. Magazines, movies, interviews. People started saying she could beat Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. The media made her into an unstoppable superhero, and fans got burned out. When Holly Holm head kicked her into another dimension at UFC 193, it wasn't just a loss. It was the most celebrated defeat in UFC history. Celebrities mocked her. Fans who once cheered her were now laughing at her. She disappeared for a year, came back against Amanda Nunes, and got brutally finished again. By then, fans had moved on. Ronda went from being the face of the UFC to being the perfect example of hype gone wrong. Colby Covington. Colby Covington might be the most intentional villain the UFC has ever seen. Early in his career, nobody cared about him. He was winning fights, but the UFC was about to cut him because he wasn't entertaining. Then he flipped the switch. He turned into the loudest, most hated trash talker in MMA. The Make America Great Again hats, the insults, the wild interviews. Colby became a walking meme. Fans booed him everywhere he went. Fighters hated him. Even his own gym turned on him. But here's the thing. It worked. Suddenly people cared. Every fight became a must-see, not because people wanted to see him win, but because they wanted to see him get knocked out. When he won the interim welterweight title, fans hated it. When he fought Usman, the build-up was pure chaos. And even though he lost both fights, Colby somehow stayed in the spotlight. He's one of the few fighters who built his career on being hated. And in the UFC, that might actually be the smartest move of all.